There are places in a house that are better left untouched. Dark, cold, and silent. The basement holds more than just dust and forgotten memories. For the Peterson family, it became the heart of their worst nightmares. And what they discovered down there was something they would never forget. John and Sarah Peterson, along with their 8-year-old son Liam, had recently moved into what they thought was their dream home. It was an old house, with plenty of space and a yard for Liam to play in. But from the very first day, something felt wrong about the basement. The air was always cold, the lights would flicker, and an overwhelming sense of dread seemed to hang over the stairs leading down. At first, they ignored it. Every house has its quirks, they thought. But Liam refused to go near the basement. One evening, during dinner, he asked a chilling question. "Mom, Dad, why is the boy in the basement crying?" John and Sarah froze. They hadn't told Liam anything about the basement. There wasn't any boy. They brushed it off as a child's imagination, but the unease lingered. Over the next few nights, the entire family began having nightmares. John dreamt of a pale, hollow-eyed child standing at the foot of the basement stairs. Sarah would wake up drenched in sweat after hearing muffled cries echoing from below. Liam's dreams were the worst. He screamed every night, saying, "The boy in the basement is angry. He wants us to leave." After weeks of torment, John and Sarah decided to confront their fear. Armed with flashlights, they descended the creaking steps into the basement, their hearts racing. The air grew colder with each step. As they reached the bottom, they noticed something strange, a locked door hidden behind some old shelves. It wasn't on the original plans of the house. Determined to get answers, John forced it open. Behind the door, they found a small, cramped room. In the center lay the skeletal remains of a child, curled up, a dusty teddy bear still clutched in his bony fingers. The truth hit them like a punch. The child had been forgotten, locked in the basement by his abusive father decades ago, left to die in the dark, alone and terrified. The child's restless spirit had been trapped in the basement ever since, full of rage and sorrow. His ghost had been trying to communicate, to be set free from the torment of his past. As soon as they discovered the remains, the temperature in the room dropped even more. Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut behind them. The air grew thick, and the child's spirit materialized before them, his pale face twisted with anger. His eyes, hollow and cold, locked onto Sarah. She screamed as an invisible force grabbed her by the ankle, pulling her towards the skeleton. John tried to help, but the spirit was too strong. The lights flickered out, and the last thing they saw was the child's face, twisted in fury, as they were dragged into the darkness. The basement fell silent, but the Petersons were never seen again. Some say, if you listen closely at night, you can still hear the distant sound of a child's cry from the basement. Some things are better left untouched. In the Parker family's new home, an old mirror in the basement held a dark secret. A secret that would soon turn their dreams into nightmares. The Parker family, Jessica, her husband Mark, and their teenage daughter Emma, were excited to move into their new house, an old Victorian-style home with plenty of character. In the basement, they found boxes of old furniture left behind by the previous owners. Among the clutter was a tall, cracked mirror. Emma, drawn to it, brought it upstairs and placed it in her bedroom. That's when the nightmares began. Emma started having strange dreams of a shadowy figure watching her from the mirror, but when she woke up, there was no one there. At first, she thought it was just a bad dream. But soon, she began seeing the figure even when she was awake. It stood in the mirror, always watching, never moving. Her parents dismissed her concerns as teenage imagination, but they too began to feel something wasn't right. The air around the mirror was always cold, and sometimes at night, they could hear faint whispers coming from Emma's room. One night, while Jessica was walking past Emma's door, she heard soft laughter. Thinking it was Emma, she opened the door, but found her daughter fast asleep. Then, she noticed the mirror. A cold chill ran down her spine as she realized the reflection in the mirror wasn't hers. It was someone else's. Terrified, the family began to research the house and learned that the mirror had once belonged to a woman who practiced dark magic. She used it to summon spirits, but one of her rituals went horribly wrong. The spirit she summoned didn't just appear, it trapped her soul inside the mirror. Now the vengeful spirit uses the mirror to possess those who gaze into it for too long, seeking to escape its prison. Emma's behavior started to change. She became withdrawn, always staring into the mirror, as if in a trance. One night, Jessica found her daughter standing in front of the mirror, her eyes blank and her body frozen. When Jessica called her name, Emma didn't respond. Suddenly, Emma turned around, her face twisted into a sinister smile. But the reflection in the mirror didn't turn. It stayed facing forward, watching Jessica with hollow black eyes. Panicking, Mark grabbed a hammer and tried to destroy the mirror, but no matter how hard he hit it, the glass wouldn't break. The spirit's laughter echoed through the room. In a final desperate attempt, Jessica covered the mirror with a blanket, but it was too late. Emma collapsed to the floor, her eyes now as hollow and black as the spirit's. The entire family stands motionless, their eyes black, their souls now trapped forever. Music is meant to bring joy, but for the Rivers family, it brought something far darker. An old piano in their basement began playing itself, and with it came a haunting melody that would never stop. Tom and Linda Rivers, along with their 6-year-old daughter Chloe, were looking for a quiet life when they moved into an old country house. It was perfect, except for the basement. In the corner of the basement stood an old piano, dusty and out of tune. Chloe, curious as ever, was instantly drawn to it. She began pressing the keys, and though she had never learned to play, the piano started producing a hauntingly beautiful melody. At first, the parents thought it was a cute coincidence. But as the days passed, the melody began playing by itself, echoing throughout the house. Chloe insisted she had a new friend who played for her, but Tom and Linda knew there was no one else in the house. As the music continued, strange things began to happen. Chloe would hum the melody in her sleep, her eyes open but lifeless. Tom and Linda did some research and discovered that the house once belonged to a famous composer who had made a pact for fame. But the deal went wrong, and he was trapped in the basement, his spirit forever bound to the piano, searching for a new soul to claim. One evening, the melody became violent, the piano keys smashing down with unseen force. Chloe stood by the piano, watching as a shadowy figure sat at the bench, playing frantically. Tom and Linda rushed downstairs to pull her away, but they were too late. The spirit of the composer reached out, pulling Chloe into the darkness beneath the piano. Chloe's haunting melody continues, as if she has become part of the music forever. Some homes are built on more than just foundations. Beneath the walls, beneath the floors, lies a darkness. For the Harris family, the basement held buried secrets, long forgotten but not forgiven. And once they disturbed it, there was no escape. The Harris family, David, his wife Karen, and their teenage son Michael, had just moved into an old farmhouse. The house had a large basement, which David planned to convert into a workshop. But from the moment they moved in, Michael had strange feelings about the basement. He said it felt like someone was watching him, even when he was alone down there. Ignoring the warnings, David began clearing out the basement. One day, while breaking down an old wall, he uncovered something strange, a set of bones buried in the dirt. At first, he thought they were animal bones, but as he dug deeper, he realized they were human remains. The sight of them sent a cold shiver through his body, but instead of reporting it, David quickly covered the bones back up, fearing it would delay their plans for the house. That night, the nightmares began. Michael started hearing whispers in his sleep, soft voices calling his name, urging him to return to the basement. The whispers soon grew louder, and Michael could no longer sleep. He would wake up covered in sweat, terrified, saying someone was calling to him from under the floor. Karen grew concerned and started researching the history of the house. She found out that, decades ago, the house had belonged to a cruel landlord who buried the bodies of his victims in the basement, hiding them beneath the floors. The souls of the murdered had been trapped there ever since, waiting for someone to uncover their remains. One night, Michael, unable to resist the whispers, sleepwalked into the basement. Karen and David found him standing in the middle of the room, his eyes open but lifeless. Suddenly, the floor began to shake, and cracks formed along the ground. From beneath the earth, skeletal hands reached up, grabbing at Michael's feet, pulling him down. David tried to pull Michael away, but the hands were too strong. One by one, more figures began to rise from the ground, rotting corpses with hollow eyes, dragging themselves toward the family. Karen screamed as one of the corpses lunged at her, its decaying hands wrapping around her throat. In a desperate attempt to save his family, David grabbed a shovel and tried to break through the floor, but it was no use. The spirits were too powerful. As the ground gave way beneath them, the entire family was pulled down into the dark earth, their screams fading into silence. Now, when anyone passes by the old farmhouse, they say they can still hear faint whispers coming from the basement. Whispers of the dead, waiting for their next victims.